Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest aliens and UFOs video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's continue the wonderful book UFO Sightings by Alan Baker. This one going into chapter 10. It starts a whole new theme associated with bodies of evidence. So as you can see, this chapter will be dedicated to various points of history, those that involve good evidence when it comes to the world of aliens and UFOs. Some of it I think I've already talked about here on my channel, but at least it'll be good to revisit, and some of it will be some new stuff as well. So without further ado, the first segment is going to be called the Roswell autopsy footage. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. This was that infamous footage that spread around sometime in the 90s. So let's see essentially what it says, and then I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it too. So here's essentially what it starts with. Early in 1995, word spread through the ufology community of an event that had long been dreamed about by researchers. The news was quickly picked up by the world's press, and within a few months was being reported both by the respected broadsheet newspapers and supermarket tabloids. It seemed to have finally happened. There was, after all, conclusive proof that a UFO had crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. The evidence? Genuine film of an autopsy conducted on the body of a UFO crew member. Of course, as usual in the murky world of ufology, it wasn't quite as straightforward as that. The man at the center of this astonishing development was Ray Santilli, an independent film producer based in London who claimed to have spoken with a former military cameraman originally in connection with some 1950s footage of Elvis Presley. According to Santilli, after they had reviewed the film of Presley, the cameraman had mentioned that he had some other footage which might be of interest. It was what he has come to be known as the Roswell alien autopsy film. The cameraman, now in his 80s, explained his startling possession of this incredibly important record by claiming that he had always processed his own film, and the Roswell footage was no exception. He had thus made a copy for himself, which he had kept through the long decades since that fateful year, 1947. In fact, the only reason he had now decided to sell it was that he wanted to buy a wedding present for his granddaughter. Needless to say, Stanton Friedman, as the first researcher to give serious credence to the Roswell incident, was intrigued when he heard of this autopsy film. To his credit, he has also been extremely cautious and was well aware of the damage that could be caused to ufology in general and the work done in Roswell in particular, should this footage be discovered to be a hoax. When Friedman finally managed to contact Santilli, the latter claimed that President Truman was clearly recognizable in the film, that the autopsy had been conducted in Dallas, Texas, not far from the 8th Air Force headquarters in Fort Worth, and that it had been established that Truman had indeed been in Dallas at the time of the autopsy. When Friedman asked him if he had checked with the Truman Library, Santilli replied that he had. However, Friedman himself checked and discovered that there were no records of Harry Truman being in Texas or New Mexico between June and October in 1947. This made Friedman suspicious, for even if Truman had made a secret trip to Dallas, there was no record of it, which meant that Santilli had not verified his presence in Dallas as he had claimed. Eventually, Friedman was able to meet with Santilli in London. During their conversation, Santilli mentioned that the cameraman and his wife were living in Orlando, Florida, whereas he had told other people that they were living in Cleveland and Cincinnati, perhaps to throw researchers off the trail. On May 5th, 1995, the film was screened at the Museum of London in front of a large contingent of journalists and UFO researchers. Although Santilli was present, he offered no introduction, no explanation of what was being presented, and he quickly left as soon as the film was over, thus depriving those present of the question and answer session to which they were entitled. In addition, although Santilli made numerous promises of access to the mysterious cameraman, they were never fulfilled. However, a name did eventually surface: Jack Barnett. Yet even this piece of verifiable information led to a dead end and even more suspicious. Jack Barnett did not appear on the list of cameramen service any of the armed services in 1947. Although Stanton Friedman was invited to the screening of the footage on May 5th, he did not receive his invitation until 24 hours before the event. Since he lives in Canada, it did not prove possible for him to make the transatlantic hop in time. On May 3rd, he sent a fax to Fantilli, challenging him to produce the information necessary to a full and proper evaluation of the footage. Subject: purported Roswell crash saucer and autopsy film footage. As a scientist who was the first investigator of the Roswell story and is still actively investigating it, I'm very concerned that despite the almost 4 months that have gone by since the first public noise about the footage, you have provided no evidence whatsoever to substantiate any of my numerous claims. Your claim in the first conversation back in mid-January that the emulsion had been dated as the right time frame, that you have been researching the case for over 1 year and had all kinds of paperwork from the cameraman that you had established that President Truman was in Dallas, Texas when the autopsy took place, including checking with the Truman Library, that you didn't know who I was despite my having authored what many consider the definitive book on Roswell, Crash at Corona, besides publishing many papers about Roswell and Majestic 12. When we met on April 4th in London, you claimed that cameraman JB, Jack Barnett, was given $100,000, but no receipt was obtained, that he was dominated by his wife, but that she didn't know anything about the deal. They both sounded very unlikely. Surely, if the film were genuine, you would have examined it in detail by someone like me, who had been working on this story for more than 17 years, and by film experts. You would have provided as a minimum the following data. Number 1, the make and model of the film camera used. Number 2, the type of film used and the dates of the filming. Number 3, evidence in the form of a written report from Kodak or whoever supposedly determined the vintage of the film. Number 4, JB's military discharge papers. Number 5, a set or 2 of military orders from the right time frame indicating where JB was assigned, the name of his associates, etc. Number 6, a receipt for the $100,000. Number 7, some kind of withdrawal slip showing from whence cometh the $100,000. Your small offices give no indication that you would find it easy to lay your hands on that amount of cash. Number 8, evidence of a supposed showing to supposed religious leaders. Number 9, any evidence that BBC London had ever intended to show this footage. Number 10, evidence that there had been contact with the Truman Library and any indication that Truman was in Dallas any time in the period of July 1st to September 30th, 1947. They tell me he wasn't in Texas. Number 11, any evidence that your effort is other than an attempt to spread this information to discredit Roswell, similar to the U.S. Air Force attack on Roswell in September 1994, similar to the Doug and Dave faked crop circle nonsense of several years back. Douglas Bauer and David Chorley claim to have been behind a large number of hoax crop circles throughout southern England. In short, it seems to me you should put up or shut up. Sincerely, Stanton T. Friedman. The following day, May 4th, Santilli offered a rather short and terse reply to this challenge. He said, "None of the above is of interest to me." Much controversy has centered on the actual dating of the film stock itself. For instance, Graham Birdsall scribes in the September-October 1995 issue of UFO magazine how the Kodak office there in Copenhagen, Denmark, was asked to date the symbols on the spool edge. They concluded that the square and triangle markings gave 1947 as the year in which the stock was manufactured. However, according to Peter Milson, the marketing planning manager with Kodak in England, the Copenhagen office was very inexperienced and didn't realize the symbols appeared on a 20-year cycle. Santilli had used Kodak's name in the commercial promotion of the footage, and this prompted Milson to issue the following statement. Roswell footage, comments from Kodak. The possibility of life forms on planets other than Earth has always fix the imagination. This has been particularly true in the movie business, and Kodak has been involved in supplying camera negative to such films as E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. More recently, we have become involved in a more complex situation. Namely, we have been asked to confirm the age of a piece of film known as the Roswell film, which allegedly shows alien life forms. We have seen sections of either the film or its projection leader in 3 Kodak locations: the United Kingdom, Hollywood, and Denmark. The following outlines the conclusions of our examinations. Number 1, in our manufacturing process, we put a code on the edge of the film which repeats every 20 years. Number 2, the symbols we have seen on the Roswell film samples suggest the film was manufactured in either 1927, 1947, or 1967. Number 3, we are therefore unable to categorically confirm when this film was manufactured. Number 4, it should also be remembered that even if the age of the film manufactured is confirmed, this does not necessarily indicate that the film was shot and processed in that same year. So the bottom line is that although we would like to know if aliens actually exist, Kodak cannot categorically confirm either the age of the film or when it was shot and processed. Good stuff. Let's go ahead and let's end that here. And then we'll talk about this part. Already off to a good start when it comes to the theme associated with bodies of evidence. The next part will continue more information about that Roswell autopsy footage. Exciting stuff, right? This is immediately something that I remember back from the 90s. Remember everyone, whenever it was during that time, if you were around, at least during your younger years, this alien footage like exploded everywhere. All of a sudden, everyone was talking about it. It was on news reports. It was on newspapers. It was on those tabloids as well. There was no internet around, but there was still, at least like broad internet, but it was still at least enough of people, talking about it that they were excited. Like this was the kind of stuff. I remember even Fox at that time was gearing up for a special event. Like they were showcasing this footage. I think it was in one parts or several parts, but they were going to showcase it, and it was hosted by Riker himself from the Star Trek Next Generation cast. So I remember that, and and I remember seeing it at the time, and it was pretty neat. It was pretty interesting to look at. Of course, time ended up proving everything else wrong with regards to the footage, how it was obviously turning out to be fake. And here you have a situation where Stan Freeman himself already had his red flags up. Like he went in with an open mind, is the impression that I got, but he was also ready with questions. Lots of investigation that needed to be done because he wanted to make certain that whatever was being claimed could actually be backed up, and it wasn't just a quick cash grab, which is what everything was pointing out towards. But otherwise, yeah, as far as that situation involving Ray Santilli and everything that Stanton Friedman was asking him about, even meeting him in person in London, you can see this chapter illustrates the preparedness that he had, how he was able to basically have everything rebuked or not even offered an answer to once he was able to get in touch with Santilli and then try to find out. And then probably the biggest indicator was getting invited to the screening 24 hours before the event. And then obviously this guy being there, but not necessarily introducing himself or the film and not staying there afterward and not giving Stanton Friedman a chance to be there as well, knowing the skeptic that he's going to be. And then he was off. He was off at that point to another location. So it'll be interesting to see what the next part here illustrates about the situation. And as always, money always talks, money always wins. So I'm sure whatever happened afterward, this guy made a fortune from it. And that was the whole point. So interesting stuff. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.